Hey everybody, I am Caris Snider and welcome back to Unmasked, where we talk about real struggles, but we pour in real hope on those struggles. I'm so glad to have you here with us. If this is your first time joining us, you can come and see us here every week on Spectrum 180 or the Roku, or find us on Facebook Live right here on My Coleman Television. And we are also excited to be offering the show through podcasts, through all those different platforms that you can find through Google, Apple, lots of different ways to find us through the podcast. So thank you guys for joining us here. Like I said, we talk about those real struggles, those things that we hide, that we feel like we're the only ones dealing with those struggles, dealing with those battles, no matter the greatness or the smallness of it. And we feel like we can't talk about those things. And so what we do every week is we focus on those things that we're all dealing with, and we take the mask off of it, and then we figure out, okay, where is the hope in this? How can we overcome this? Because there is hope and there is a way to overcome. So for all of you joining us, thank you. Today, parents, students, those of you who are working on things where you're going to have to take a test soon, that is what we're talking about today. We're talking about test anxiety. That is a real thing. And as I have been in the schools over the last few months, I am learning more and more just how real test anxiety is. And not just for our students, but for our teachers, because there is so much pressure that is put on our students to perform, right? To hit these certain goals, to hit these certain benchmarks. But I'm learning they are not the only ones that have this pressure. These teachers, this faculty and staff, they have pressure that is put on them from their higher ups to hit certain benchmarks, because then it defines them as a teacher. So they have this anxiety as well to make sure their students are prepared, to make sure they're doing the right thing. So we all deal with some form of anxiety when it comes to a test at any age, a child, a student, or if you're an adult. So I encourage you, if you are watching this today, share this episode, because someone around you is dealing with this and is facing this right now. So it is very normal, just as we talked about last week, to have those nervous or those anxious feelings when you're about to take a test. I know I shared with you guys about my driver's ed test and how I failed that test, and then even anxiety in taking a calculus test. But with test anxiety, what happens is it overcomes you, and you have this intense fear, and you have this intense anxiety, and you're not able to recall those things that you've learned and those things that you've studied. And what happens is that anxiety, when it takes over your brain, when that fight or flight response has taken over, it makes you want to run. It takes that flight response in, and your IQ will actually drop 13 to 20 points. It doesn't matter how much you've prepared. It doesn't matter how many nights you've stayed up and you've highlighted and you learned. If that anxiety takes over, that IQ drops, and you can't even recall simple things, even maybe your name, simple things like 2 + 2, your address, something that you have studied and pored over for weeks. If that anxiety takes over, it causes you to not be able to remember. So what we're going to talk about is causes of that test anxiety and ways to overcome. There are strategies, which is the good news today. There is hope in overcoming that test anxiety. So very quickly, what are some causes of test anxiety? First of all, if you have had poor test outcomes in your past, you have those memories stored in your amygdala, and that comes back, that feeling comes back as you are faced with new tests in front of you. So even for me, when I failed that driver's ed test, I had that memory within me. And so testing from then on that mattered, that had something on it that would cause great results or cause great failures in my life, I began to put pressure on myself because of that past experience. So think for a minute, look through your past, and can you recall those moments where maybe you failed a test and it had there was just great things that came with it, and you failed that test, or maybe you had a poor response from a teacher or an adult in your life because you made a bad grade on your test, and you can remember that, maybe some things that they said to you that were negative and hurtful. So you store that memory, and then as you have other tests coming forward in your life, here comes that anxiety because you're scared that that memory, that same experience is going to happen. So that's one cause. Another cause, which is something that we can control, is when we're unprepared. When we don't study, when we don't put forth the effort, if we're not prepared for that test, here comes the anxiety. Now, I know pop quizzes come, students, and you have teachers that'll throw those on you, and I know that can cause anxiety. But when you're not prepared, if you're not reading and you're not studying, that can cause the anxiety to become greater. Another one, and this is a trigger for me, and I will talk more throughout our Unmasked series about this, about my own life, but being afraid of failure. Failure is a trigger word and a trigger statement for so many of us. We don't want to fail. We don't want to fail our parents. We don't want to fail our teachers, the principal. We don't want to fail our boss or our friends or those in our life that we feel have influence over us, or we have influence over them. And we connect our self-worth, how we view ourselves, based on a test score. And we put so much pressure on ourselves with this test score, and we think that test score defines us. And I want to pause here for just a minute and remind you and let you know, a test score does not get to define who you are. God already defined you when He created you. And Psalms 139 tells us that He says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. So don't tie your self-worth to one test, because it doesn't get to define you. Yes, you're going to have tests that you're going to have to take, and we're going to talk about more strategies about that in a moment, but they don't get to define who you are. And you're not a failure if you make a bad grade on your test. If you make a failing grade, that doesn't mean you are a failure. That just means you may have to cope and learn differently. So that's another one. Being afraid of failure is a huge cause of test anxiety. There are some biological causes of test anxiety. So your body and your brain is responding in a way that does make you feel anxious, and you don't know how to deal with that. So what's happening is, if a test is laid in front of you, or you're going to take a test, if it's for real estate, or maybe you're taking a test to become a lawyer or a doctor, whatever it is, that adrenaline, that hormone of adrenaline, is rushing through your body. And when it can come on in an overflowing way, in a strong and powerful way, your body doesn't know how to respond to that adrenaline, and then here comes that fight or flight response. So many times when that is rushing inside of us, it causes stress to increase. And when that stress increases, our typical response is not to fight against it and to push back and be calm. It's to run. Get me out of here. Get me away from this stress. Let me get away from the situation. I don't want to take that test, so I'm not going to school today. I'm not going to that place where I need to take that test. I'm just not going to face it. So when that adrenaline is rushing and that biological cause is happening, instead of facing it and fighting against it, we take that flight response instead.
Premier Bank of the South currently offers a variety of School Spirit debit cards. These are available to all of our customers, and they're free of charge. Stop by one of our offices today and get yours ordered. For a listing of our School Spirit debit cards and our office locations, please feel free to visit us at www.premierbankofthesouth.com.
In Coleman, we're looking forward to more play dates and date nights, first checkups, and checks on the bucket list. We're looking forward to first looks and second chances, and we're looking forward to making these moments possible with the benefits of better technology and the insights of leading experts. We're looking forward to a healthier Coleman.
And then lastly, there are some mental causes of test anxiety. Students, parents, adults, when we have that mental thought in our head, I'm gonna fail. I'm not gonna do good on this test. My teacher already thinks I'm a failure. My teacher already expects me to fail, or I've failed in the past, or my parents have already told me that I'm not gonna do good, or you've told yourself, I'm not gonna do good on this test. If that is your expectation, you've already set yourself up to not do well on that test. And then when it's put in front of you, those fearful thoughts come rushing in and you can't recall any information that you do know that you did prepare for because you think you're not gonna be able to do it. Or another mental factor that comes in is you recall those past test moments where you've had fear and you've had anxiety rush in, and that was a scary thing. When anxiety comes upon you and your heart is racing and your breathing becomes shortened and you become dizzy and your head starts to hurt, y'all, I get it. It is scary, especially if you don't know what it is and you don't know what's happening. So if you've had that happen to you in the past and you didn't know what it is, and then you sit in front of a test again and you're already thinking you're gonna fail it, well, then you have those thoughts of, well, what if those feelings come back? What if my heart starts rushing again? What if I can't breathe? And then you're not scared of taking the test, you're scared of the causes of what's happening in your body. And then instead of taking the test, instead of working hard, what happens then because of those mental factors? What do? We give up. We isolate ourselves. We remove ourselves from the situation. We remove ourselves from the people that can help us. And that's what any type of anxiety wants to do in your life. I can see it even right now, just in our news and our media, on your social media, if you're scrolling through, there is so much anxiety. And what's happening? People are panicking, they are isolating themselves, they are moving away from things that are important in their life, and they're staying in one place. They're staying in that fearful, panicked place. And you can't live life there. When you're there, you're frozen in fear, and you can't move, you can't function, you can't think, you can't respond. So even in test anxiety, any other type of anxiety in your life, it's the same way. But we do not want to be caught up in fear of taking a test. Here's the deal, students, and I know some of you I spoke to last week and we talked about this. Let's be very honest. And adults, if you're watching this, you're probably going to be shaking your head or saying yes and amen to this. You're going to have pressure. Life, unfortunately, is not a Disney movie. It's not a fairy tale ending. There is pressure. You're going to have pressure in your life. Even when you get out of school or you get out of college, you're going to be faced with a moment with your employer, with your job, where you may have to take a test or you may have to do something to get to a higher level that's going to require you to recall information. So there's going to be pressure. So we know that, we understand that, so you got to accept that. So now, how do we cope? How do we deal with the pressure when there comes a test, when there comes a moment where we kind of have to rise to the top, rise to the situation? First of all, make sure you're prepared. We can actually control our preparedness. That's something that you can do. So how can you make sure you're prepared? So this means studying early for a test, not just cramming the night before, which I always tell people, and maybe I try to convince myself of this. I feel like I do better under pressure. However, we really don't. When we can prepare, when we can study a little bit every day and know this test is coming in 2 weeks or a month or whenever, if we can just do a little bit at a time, that will help your brain to recall it. You're building that muscle memory. It's just like riding a bike. And the more you learn it, the more you read it, that muscle memory, when it's put in front of you, you're going to be able to recall it. So make sure you're preparing. Even ask your teacher if there are certain ways you should be studying. No, they're not going to tell you the exact information, especially as you get older. But you might could say, are there certain ways that I should study for this test? Do you have any tips or advice? So you want to make sure you're prepared. You want to get rid of those negative thoughts. You don't want to continue to put yourself down and to say, I didn't study hard enough. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. You want to change those thoughts. Now, changing habits, it takes time. So you need to start doing that now. So some things that you can do is to say, I can do this. I can work hard. I can read a little bit every day and sit down and do a little bit at a time. Philippians 4:13 is a Bible verse that I've had to hold on to throughout my life. And it says, "For I can do all things through Christ because he gives me strength." So a lot of times that is a verse that I will recall. And I'll even tell you guys, even sometimes when I don't believe that, I'll have to pray and say, "Okay, God, help my unbelief. Help me to remember that I can do this." So you want to change those thoughts about yourself. And the more you think positively, then you're going to have a more positive outlook when that test comes. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. I've talked with many of you about this. Even last week, I did not get enough sleep. But if you know you have a test and you know you have things coming up, your body needs sleep. Your brain needs rest so that it can be ready to go when you need it to help you recall that information. So you want to make sure that you're getting enough sleep. If you're getting prepared and you're studying early, then you're not going to have to worry about cramming late at night. So make sure that you're doing that. Make sure your body's getting enough rest, that you're laying down, and just trust that you can get up the next day and study some more. Take deep breaths. We've talked about this. Your body, what's happening if it is reacting in that anxiety mode, is trying to get that breath, that oxygen to your muscles to get ready to fight or flight. So what you're wanting to do is take that control back from the emotional part of your brain, take those deep breaths so that you can calm down, so that you can move to that cognitive thinking part of your brain, and then that allows you to know that you can go back to all that information you've studied, all that preparation that you've done. By taking those deep, solid breaths, it's going to allow you to look at that test and know, I've got this. I know these answers, and I can do this. And then lastly, guys, this one's a big one. You need to avoid the perfectionist trap. You are not going to make 100 on every test. You're not going to pass with flying colors on every test. You're not going to be the top 5 every single time. And you know what? That is absolutely okay. It is okay to not be perfect. We are not. We are all human. No one is perfect. And you can't expect yourself to be perfect. Even if you can recall all the information as you are preparing and studying, there may be a question that's asked in a way that causes you to miss it. And if you miss that question, it is okay. When we are putting the stress of perfection on ourselves, we're setting ourselves up to fail, because we're adding in stress. We're adding in that overwhelming feeling, thinking that we've got to be perfect, that we've got to get every single thing right, or we are failing. That's not the case. What I tell my kids when they are taking a test, we tell them, do your best and trust God with the rest. That's all you can do. Just do your best. And if you are preparing, if you are banishing those negative thoughts, if you're getting enough sleep, if you're taking those deep breaths before your test, then know that you are actually doing your best. And no one expects perfection from you, not your teachers, not your parents. So don't expect it from yourself. So I hope today, guys, that this was helpful for you as you listened to the causes of test anxiety, because maybe that's not something you deal with. So maybe that will help you understand what others around you are facing. But now you have these ways to overcome it, to deal with that pressure that is facing you in your life, and to know that you've got this and you're doing better than you think you are. So thank you guys for joining us here on Unmasked. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Caris Snider. You can check out my website, carissnider.com. I have a devotional out called Anxiety Elephant. It's a great devotional for anyone who is facing any anxiety in a mild or severe form. So I'd love for you guys to get that. It can be a great encouraging tool for you. Next week and in the coming weeks, we're going to be talking about stress and feeling overwhelmed, because we all find ourselves in that place. So we're going to be talking about how to deal with that overwhelming feeling and how to cope with stress. So thank you guys for joining us here, and we'll see you next week.